Zoom. The Zoom meeting is open, and if I need to share the Zoom window, I can do that. I can kind of switch over there in the stream, I think. But for whatever reason, I was getting a weird error um, from Zoom about trying to broadcast the meeting. But it was saying I don't have, maybe if I try this, some little technical difficulties. It's weird. You don't have permission to live stream. You know what? Maybe it's in my Zoom settings. But just kind of trying to hammer together a solution here to get Zoom to work. But we are live and looking forward to starting the group coaching session here in about 4 minutes, give or take. Got some really interesting stuff for you today. And we'll just kind of hang out together for a few minutes while we wait for everybody to join. We had 19 people register for everything, or for the event. I'm not sure why it's saying I don't have permission. I toggle it off, toggle it back on. It's it's so weird. Like, I can show you. This is let's see. Right here, you can see right here, the settings. It says allow live streaming of meetings. It's definitely allowed. I'm not really sure why it's saying it's not allowed, but yeah, super weird. But it will not take. Maybe the issue is on the LinkedIn page. Maybe LinkedIn is saying I don't have permission to stream, but I definitely do. I was just live not long ago. Yeah, like a couple of days ago. Maybe if I join the meeting this way. Oh, the stream is live, but it's live through the studio. I'm not sure what the issue is with Zoom and getting it connected. But as I do more of these, we'll hammer out all the technical difficulties and get everything in good working order. I'm sure I may have to get on technical support chat with LinkedIn or something and try to figure all that out. It is a little frustrating to keep having technical difficulties. But if those are the least of our problems, I mean, if that's the extent of our problems, we're doing okay, because that's not too bad. But here we go. In about 2 minutes, we're going to get started. Really, really excited to share content this morning. I will say, if you're tuning in, if you ever plan to do these, we're trying to do these like every week. There almost certainly will be weeks where we have to skip, either because of scheduling conflicts or I'm on vacation or something like that. But every Thursday morning around 10:30 a.m., I'm going to try to do this live stream, this Rise Above weekly group coaching session. And I want people to feel free to join. You don't have to be a client, although I encourage my clients to join. But you don't have to be a client in order to join. I will send out the Zoom information to all of the people who sign up to attend through LinkedIn. So the best thing to do if you want to be a part of this is go to LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn, look for the post each week about Rise Above group coaching, and attend the event. Just click the little button that says attend event, and you'll pop up in a queue of people that I can, attendees that I can manage, and I message each person individually the Zoom information. Then you just join by Zoom, and you can directly interact with me on Zoom, and we'll get questions answered and that sort of thing. So it looks like I am in fact live on LinkedIn, but it's just not, for whatever reason, it's not letting me connect the Zoom to the stream. So that's fine. I'm gonna live with it. It is what it is. I don't want to. It's 10:30, so I don't want to delay anymore. I want to go ahead and get going. And people can filter in if they want to. They can ask questions in the comments section for the event. And if I see those comments come up, I'll just kind of refresh this page periodically and look for questions from the group coaching session. But I've got a person joining me on the Zoom side. Unfortunately, we were not able to connect Zoom with the live stream, so I'm not able to broadcast that out. But thanks for joining. And if you can go ahead and just if you're on Zoom, go ahead and mute your mic, and you can just send me questions through the chat or interact with me through the chat, because no one else will be able to see or hear you on the stream this week. Hopefully we'll get that nailed down. We'll figure that out for future weeks. Let's see, or you can just ask me a question and I'll pause for a minute and then answer it. But the first thing we're going to do is just kind of talk about this week's theme and objectives for about 5 minutes. This week I wanted to talk about adapting to change and overcoming challenges in general. It's kind of a big topic of the book. It's one of the probably overall, that's what the book is really all about. It's about recovering from a setback, going from setback to comeback, if you will. But basically, how do you get back up after life knocks you down? If it's a professional setback, a personal setback. I work with a number of people who've been through painful relationship changes. And that's, something that I know the pain of all too well myself. So that can be a thing that just wrecks your whole life, right? It just makes everything in your life harder because it's sort of got its tendrils in everything. Like your relationship has its tendrils in every other part of your life psychologically. So whenever you experience a disruption in that one aspect of your life, it ripples through to everything else, and it can really throw you off your game. It can even throw you off your game in the workplace or in your professional life. It's difficult to compartmentalize everything, and people don't always do that really well. So, if you've got that kind of an issue, likewise, sometimes people have a problem in their professional life that can affect them at home. And, you can feel like maybe you're just not like completely present the way you would like to be in your life. And these disruptions are really hard. Getting past them requires a high degree of resilience, flexibility, psychological flexibility, emotional flexibility, and sort of elasticity, the ability to just take a hit. And I'm not saying that you just have to roll over and take it in life. Far be it from me to suggest such a silly thing. I don't think that. But I do think that the toughest fighters are the ones who are able to absorb a lot of blows and wait for their moment to counterpunch. It takes patience, it takes toughness, it takes fortitude to get through these kinds of challenges. Whenever people think about these kinds of disruptions, they often feel a lot of discomfort or even fear at the thought of a disruption. But instead of a typical tough love approach, I think it's better to understand and appreciate the value of disruption. I don't want to just be like, knuckle under, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, buck up, buttercup. It's, this is the real world. I kind of hate that because it's, number one, very insensitive. But number two, and more importantly, it's invalidating. It sort of dismisses your own personal experience of everything, which is not helpful. So when I was 17, my family was struggling with persistent interpersonal and financial disruptions, and had at that point for about 5 years. And I asked my grandmother if I could build an apartment in her basement. Her basement was unfinished. She'd built her house in 1964, and she generously agreed. This was 1999, right? So she agreed, and the shop teacher at my high school, Mr. Baggett, great guy, was a general contractor as well, kind of rallied some of the boys from the shop class to help me to do all the framing. So we did all the framing. We ran the electrical. We did the drywall. We put the carpet down. I did the drop ceiling. Kind of did a terrible job of the drop ceiling because I did it myself. But we finished that basement apartment. It was a little studio apartment, and we got it done kind of just in the nick of time as my family was losing our home to foreclosure. And I was able to move into the new apartment, and I got a stable place to live. But I also created this dynamic of greater mutual support between my grandmother and myself. It was traumatic to lose my childhood home. It's one thing to leave home in the normal course of life and events and go off to college or whatever, like move out and get a job or whatever your normal thing is. It's like you're an adult now, go on. That's normal. But to be forced to leave, for it not to be voluntary, for it not to be an option, that can be traumatic, because you feel it as a loss. It's the same thing, really, but because it's not a choice, because it's imposed upon you, it doesn't come from within you. It has this sort of outer pressure on your identity, and it can be really hard. But choosing to rise to this challenge in a different way and adapt to it and be flexible and say, well, I can still make a place for myself. I can depend on the love of family, the support of family, the generosity of people who care about me, and I can find a way to have a home. Allowed me to build a closer relationship with my grandmother. It gave me a deep appreciation for trades. I had taken shop class because I just wanted to be more handy. But making that choice without really even seeing the writing on the wall at that point was providential. It was God sort of, giving me the right interest, inspiring the right interest or attraction to things at the right time. And when I noticed that, I was like, oh, wow, there's really a pattern of, yes, you're going to go through something hard, but God's going to make a way for you. And I had the opportunity to live with my grandmother for 6 very precious years. And after I moved out of that apartment, one of my younger sisters lived there for a time. And that continued a virtuous cycle of symbiosis that I had established there. And for nearly a decade, that mutual support that we were able to receive from and provide to my grandmother was a huge blessing to her and to us. So rather than seeing the disruption of losing our home, I was able to perceive an opportunity to build something new that benefited me and others that I loved. This ability to transform loss into opportunity is a huge skill. Like, it's a very, very powerful skill. It requires you to encounter disruption as more than just a setback. Disruptions can be difficult to encounter, and we might be afraid to encounter them. But for a really powerful leader, like a strong leader, they're almost never really afraid, not deeply afraid of setbacks or disruptions, because they know that they have the resilience in the face of whatever disruption presents itself to adapt and change, to be flexible. And they know that disruptions are unavoidable. You can't avoid it. I mean, nobody saw COVID coming. Nobody saw that coming. Well, a few people, knew, oh, well, that's possible at some point, pandemic and everything. We'd had movies like Outbreak and whatever for years, right? Like, we sort of knew it was possible, but that specific disruption at that specific time, nobody knew. So I know it's very hard, by the way, to do this. I used to see my life as a series of losses. I used to tell my wife, my ex-wife now, but I used to tell her, I'd say, I feel like God only allows me to have things so that they can be taken away. It was pretty cynical. It was, like, why am I only allowed to have things just so that they can be taken away? What is the point of that? What am I supposed to get from that? And the answer was, I'm supposed to get this from that. It was so that this could happen, so that I could write this book, so that I could be here with you, helping you get through whatever loss you've suffered. It was so that I could learn lessons that I could share with others, so that I could bless other people, just like I could pivot from the loss of my family home and build something new that benefited other people, myself and other people, right? This is the same. It's the same kind of pattern. Loss isn't just loss, and it's not just for the purpose of loss. So we're going to get into some Q&A and some discussion here a little bit, but I want to kind of, before we do that, I want to kind of look at some of the changes and challenges that are in the headlines right now that we're all kind of looking at. And I want to talk a little bit about the news. What is the role that the news cycle plays for a leader? Because we all feel this push to stay relevant and to kind of keep up with what's going on in the world. And I think it's actually reckless and irresponsible to just completely bury yourself in a hole and not pay attention to what's going on in the world. But on the other hand, I was reflecting just yesterday about what I was going to talk about in this presentation and some other things and the news and all of that. What role does the news really have to play, especially in an election year where it's, politics mostly and a bunch of other stuff? What role does that have to play in a healthy life? A life where you need to unplug periodically and just get away from it because it's so gross. Like the news cycle is gross and toxic. And to my mind came the old aphorism, no news is good news. And I thought, well, if no news is good news, then all news is bad news, right? That's not what that means, but stick with me because it's fun, right? If no news is good news and all news is bad news, then every time you engage with news, you're engaging with bad and you're flooding your life with bad. There are some good news stories. There are, human interest stories and inspiring stories. And every once in a while, they throw one into the local news so that people don't just get completely depressed and tune out and be like, you guys are just here to say horrible things all the time and drive us with fear, which largely they are. I mean, the 24/7 news cycle is just rampant fear mongering. There's very little love, very little hope that comes from all of that, except maybe in the realm of science and technology, like medical news. Sometimes they take a kind of hopeful approach to presenting some of those stories, but more and more with things like AI, which has the possibility to dramatically improve the quality of human life. The spin that we get in the news cycle is fear. They're going to take your jobs. The AI is going to take your jobs. Oh no. International Monetary Fund says that 60% of white collar jobs will be disrupted by AI. And it's like, well, yes, they will be disrupted by AI. Disrupted doesn't mean it's going to go away. It doesn't mean that the robot's going to take your jobs, right? That's not what that means. Disruption means change. Things are not going to be the way they were before. But newsflash, everything is dynamic. Your whole life, always dynamic. There's always going to be disruption. And we have an opportunity for creative destruction, which is, a concept that was pioneered by Schumpeter, an economist. So go Google creative destruction. There's good news to be found there. It will inspire you. There's joy to be had in the disruption. But the news cycle, it seems, is largely negative. And in the headlines today, I was reading about political tensions. There's a Trump White House advisor, Peter Navarro, who's facing sentencing for defying a congressional subpoena. Okay, I mean, more political games, more factionalism, the same sort of stuff that in his farewell address, George Washington warned us about. George Washington said in his farewell address as he exited the presidency, he warned us about factionalism, about partisanship, essentially is what we would call it today. But to break off into these factions, he thought it would be the death of the country. Here we are. He's not wrong. He was a prophet president. I mean, Washington was by far the best president we've ever had, and it's been downhill from there with a few little upticks, right? Sad that he was the first one. You would hope that he would have been on the bell curve somewhere in the middle of the list of presidents we've had, but no, it's just been kind of downhill from him. And Donald Trump, he's the target of a lot of hate and sort of insane levels of vitriol. People just really, really, half the country hates him, but he doesn't make it any easier on himself. He's threatening to blacklist donors who contribute to Nikki Haley's campaign. Okay, why would you do that? She's at least nominally Republican, right? So it sort of just creates more infighting. I mean, it's on brand for him, but It creates more infighting. Why? It just creates more political tension. Be a unifier, bring people together. Say what you want about Barack Obama. I don't think in effect he was a unifier. I think that's why the Nobel Committee, members of the Nobel Committee expressed regret for having awarded to him the Nobel Prize. They said that that was a mistake because they had given him the Nobel Prize kind of based on the promise that he held, not the results that he had obtained, but the promise that he held for being a unifier. He was an inspiring figure at the time when he was elected. 8 years later, not so much, because his track record was garbage on being a unifier. The country was more divided, more politically charged. And if it hadn't been for Barack Obama, we never would have got Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a reaction to Barack Obama. He was not a unifier, he was a divider. And Trump is even more of a divider, arguably. I don't know. I don't know which one is more divisive, but I do know there's a lot of political tension in the world. And that can be really stressful, and it can be disruptive to your life because it can create a whole lot of anxiety in you. And it creates a lot of effects in the real world, like rising inflation and bad monetary policy, bad fiscal policy, things that disrupt the economy, cost people jobs, making the wrong call on how to handle COVID and different things. Whether should it be shutdowns? Should we have masks forever? I saw a funny meme the other day that it was like, CDC now recommends wearing seatbelts even when you're not in the car. And I thought, that's hilarious. It's not true. They didn't recommend that. It's a meme. It's just supposed to be funny. It's a joke. But hilarious because it sort of seems like, well, that does seem like the kind of thing the CDC would do. Right? It just trying to overprotect everybody. Their intentions are good, but the effects are not. And we see this too with on the other side. It's not just the government that's incompetent and corrupt. We see it even in the private sector. We've had the private sector responding through the rise of possibly, arguably grassroots movements, advocating for reform in law enforcement in recent years because of the deaths of individuals who were under arrest or in police custody, whatever. Those deaths are incredibly unfortunate. And we do deserve as a society to have law enforcement we can trust. And that can be difficult, especially when the news hypes certain stories about specific demographics and everything and sort of inflames wide scale protests and riots and, property damage and all of that. And it's gotten to the point where law enforcement agencies are now grappling with issues like police recruiting and retention and accountability. Nobody wants to do those jobs because there's a huge sector of people that hate police, regardless. I saw an African-American sheriff's deputy walking into the grocery store as I was on my way to lunch yesterday. I drove right by a grocery store, and I reflected on his experience. Just in that moment, just as I was driving by, I thought, that makes me feel good to see an African-American police officer. Right? That must be hard for him. There must be a lot of people in his life and in his community who look at him as maybe a kind of traitor, right? Like, you're a cop, Black Lives Matter. Blah. And I thought, man, that really must be hard for him. What courage he has to do that job every day, to put on that badge and that gun and get out there and police his community and, stand up for people who can't defend themselves and do his job. Good on him. I don't even know that guy, but as I saw him going in, I was like, God bless that guy. And crime rates in the US are falling. And so a lot of people are talking about rethinking policing strategies. And that is a big disruptive thing. Like, how do you stay safe in your community? How do you stay safe in your home? How do you stay safe in your business? If you're a business owner, what does it mean for you in terms of your investment in private security, surveillance, et cetera? What does that mean for your business if they're changing the way they police your community? That's huge, right? You might, if you have a warehouse, you might need to invest a lot more in security if there's a lower police presence and crime rates are dynamic in your area. So that's something to think about. And we do have the tech disruption as well. IBM's Q4 2023 earnings report showed a huge revenue increase in all segments. They've got a hybrid cloud offering and new AI offerings that are taking off. And IBM is ascendant right now. it's great, for them, for their shareholders. The company's earnings per share and revenue for Q4 exceeded expectations, and they're not alone. OpenAI, Microsoft, all the big players in AI are doing well right now. It kind of reminds me of the crypto boom, but it somehow feels more stable than crypto. But the government is looking at both crypto and AI with the stink eye, right? They are really looking at them as potential huge disruptors because they eliminate two areas where the government really likes to assert control, and that's control over the narrative, the public discourse, and control over resource allocation, money, right? If you have a currency that's not a central bank currency that people widely adopt, it makes it harder for the government to pick winners and losers, to control, how spending is done, and how, earnings and savings are allocated, and to collect taxes. It makes it harder for them, which is attractive to free thinking people, but not so much to authoritarians. It's disruptive on both for everyone, though. And then you've also got like the convenience and security issues that come up around those issues. Convenience and security, like, we don't want AI to be widely adopted and proliferate misinformation. But on the other hand, we don't want, Soviet era style censorship where we can't talk about that. Where it's easy to get into an argument with Bing's Copilot. If you've ever used Copilot for Bing and you start ask it about some sensitive topic. I mean, when I say sensitive topic, it doesn't have to be that sensitive. It could be about the new Little Mermaid movie from Disney. You start talking to it about that movie and you ask any question or say anything that's not quite 100% in alignment with the politically correct mainstream narrative around that movie, and Bing will shut down the conversation. It'll say, I think we're done here. I don't think we're going to agree. I don't think we're going to agree about this topic. It gets very sassy and it just kind of shuts it down. It's kind of hilarious. You can go and just mess with it. Just go play with Copilot and see how few prompts it takes to get into an argument with that thing, without being just completely belligerent and being a jerk, but just like what you would consider to be a normal conversation. Just go get into an argument with an AI chatbot. It's a safe space. It's okay. Probably. You might end up on a list. I don't know. But it's fun too, right? And then we have environmental concerns. I was reading a story not too long ago about a Nobel Prize winner in physics. He'd done some work in quantum mechanics, I think, and won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. And he gave a speech at a Korean technology conference. And in the speech, he was talking to young scientists, and he was specifically talking about the problems with poor data quality, with poor quality in research and poor quality in reporting of what the research is, not just coming to the wrong conclusions, but starting with a conclusion or a hypothesis and then selectively curating the data that you collect and the way that you interpret it to support that hypothesis. That's not science. That's not the way science works. Science starts with, let me ask a question. I think this is the way this is going. How does this work? I think this is how it works. Is that right? Let's go actually look with a completely open mind, with no agenda, as objective as possible. And what does the data tell us? And then report whether your hypothesis was right or not. That's the scientific method. At least that's the way I learned it in school. And that's not what they're doing. And this scientist is brilliant, genius among geniuses. And he's saying this is a problem. And it's specifically a problem, he said, in the area of climate change. Well, after that speech, he was scheduled to give a speech at the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and they canceled his speech. They canceled it because they called him a climate denier. They slapped him with that climate change denier. You're a global warming denier. You're a denier. They slapped him with the label and he got canceled. He didn't deserve that. His criticism was valid. His criticism and his concern was valid. Even if you don't like the conclusion, if you really are a believer in science, you should protect the process. You should protect the scientific method. You should want high quality data. You should want integrity in reporting and research. Everybody should want that. That's good for everyone. Promoting good science is good for humanity. And that's what he was on about. But they didn't hear that. All they heard was he believed that the science that supports anthropogenic global warming was flawed, that the process was flawed, and that we could do a better job with that. We have a lot of environmental concerns, not just about anthropogenic global warming, whether it exists or not, whether, the research really supports it or not, but we can actually measure a lot of changes in our environment, regardless of whether or not we can be super confident about the cause or agree about solutions. We can see, if we put the normative aspects of that discussion aside, we can see from a positive standpoint that about 20% of Colorado's 24 native bumblebee species are facing significant population decline and are being, petitioned for federal protection under the Endangered Species Act. And we have seen lots of species decline. Now, there could be other reasons other than climate change for that, like destruction of natural habitats, the encroachment of humans, and other effects, right? Other things. One of my clients is an environmental services company, and I know that that's close to the agenda for that company. It's close to their heart. They care a lot about that, and I've received some questions that kind of, this is a good segue, I think, into the Q&A. I have received a couple of questions, and among them is a question from this environmental services company. I won't identify them because I don't know if they're cool with that, but it wasn't publicly posted in the LinkedIn, so that's I'll just keep this to that. I'll keep it narrowed to that. The question was, they said, setbacks are definitely a catalyst for growth. Before you see the light of the situation, how do you deal with the pain of the right then and there? You make an action plan, etc. And yeah, okay. So how do you deal with the emotions? Well, I think the very first step in dealing with the emotion of a disruption, and this is an excellent segue, right? I kind of want to put a bow on the news issue and all of that, and do that and answer this question at the same time. So if we're trying to adapt to change and overcome challenges, I think the very first thing, whether we're reading a headline and we're getting kind of that tight feeling like, oh my gosh, it's like, that's really stressful. I'm really worried about the bumblebees. Or I'm really worried about Donald Trump blacklisting Nikki Haley donors or whatever. I'm really worried about AI taking my jobs. That one probably hits a little closer to home for most people. Like, these other things can seem kind of ephemeral, right? They can seem kind of out there or distant from your personal life, unless you just really love bumblebees from Colorado. It might seem a bit distant. But if you get that feeling of tightness in your chest, or that's how I kind of experience it, it's like, like I'm taking faster, shorter breaths, shallower breaths, and I feel my blood pressure start to rise. I feel my face start to heat up. That's the first step, is I notice a physiological change in my body. What does it feel like to feel stressed out, to feel anxious over a disruption? What does that physically feel like? To feel not necessarily fear, but anxiety around a disruption. I think the very first thing is to feel it, to encounter it, and then say to yourself, look, I can have the mindset that is, oh no, this is a bad thing that's happening. It's a bad thing that's happening to me. I kind of flash back to losing my childhood home, right? How did that feel? In the moment, it felt terrifying. It felt like, oh my God, I'm going to be homeless. That's the way it felt. And it felt like, oh no, this shouldn't be happening. This should not be happening. That's a judgment that I made. And you can make that about the losing the bumblebees or the AI. It should not be the case that AI is going to take our jobs. No AI should ever. And you start to formulate rules. From the moment you have that judgment, this should not be happening, you start formulating rules in your mind about the situation and how to deal with it. And then you've got a position, and before long, you are entrenched and you're ready for war. you're all kinds of triggered. That's the fight response, at least. Other people have a flight response. Oh no, I don't like that. Run away. I don't understand technology. Technology's scary to me. I don't understand how that works. I don't know what will happen. I crave the comfort of the familiar, of what I do feel like I know or what I do understand. So I'm going to run away from that and everything like that and go back to what I know. I'm going to go run in the woods. I'm going to go ride my bike outside. I'm going to go kayaking. I'm going to take a trip to a national park. I'm going to get out in nature because that makes me feel comfortable. I understand that. I know that. I felt comfortable with that. I felt safe and good when I was growing up, and I would go and play in the woods, or I would go with my family on vacations to national parks or something. Right? That makes me feel safe. I'm familiar with that. It's comfortable. I'm going to go do that, and I'm not going to worry about the robots. I'm not going to think about technology. And if someone asks me to send an email, I'm going to tell them to go screw themselves, right? Like, I'm going to disengage with technology and everything that's like it because it scares the heck out of me. And instead, I'm going to go do this other thing over here. And I've seen people do that to the point where they're kind of Luddites, right? There's certain stigmas about people of a certain generation not being hip with technology anyway. And, it kind of feeds when people engage in that way of encountering disruption, it feeds that. So we have the fight response. It's based on judgments and rules and all of that. The flight response, it's also based on judgments, but it avoids the unfamiliar, the scary, and seeks the familiar. And then there's the freeze response, which possibly may be the most delusional of all of them. The freeze response is just denial. This isn't happening. This isn't happening to me. This isn't happening in the world. This isn't happening right now. I'm just going to pretend that everything's cool. Everything is the same. I'm going to freeze right here in my life and nothing will change. I'm going to lock on to the static. This is also a kind of avoidance. The flight response and the freeze response are the kind of the same thing. One goes outward, one goes inward. And I always think of Miss Havisham from, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, where she was like left at the altar. And so she, like, in her parlor, there's still the wedding cake and it's like decades old and rotting. And she's there in her rocking chair in her wedding dress from like decades. And she's locked in to that moment of trauma in her life. Nothing has changed. She won't let anything change. She's frozen. She's frozen in time. And she will just sit there and rot. People do this. There's a show on TLC about it. It's called Hoarders. And, you feel your heart goes out to people like that because they are locked in their trauma. They are sealed in and shut up with it. They are avoiding the reality that the world is moving around them because they can't deal with that. They can't dynamically embrace the change and encounter the disruption. The first thing to do is to feel the change that's happening in your body, to feel the anxiety, to encounter that, and to accept that this is happening. And then remind yourself of the reality that it is not happening to you. It's just happening. And you are also happening in that moment with the disruption. You have the opportunity to be dynamic, and you have free will in every moment, even when you feel like you don't, even when you feel like things are happening to you. Even if you don't feel like you have free will, you still have free will. Remind yourself, I can choose to grow with the flow. I can choose to grow with the flow. This is the flow of things. It's not happening to me, it's just happening. I can swim with the current, or I can be swept along with it, or I can just drown right here and now. Those are my choices. And when you acknowledge that those are the choices, the wise one presents itself. Swim with the current, grow with the flow, go that way. Is it easier if you get swept into a rushing river? Is it easier to try to swim back up the river to, like straight against the current? or even try to stay in the same place? Can you swim it hard enough, long enough? Who has more energy, you or the river? What's going to happen to you if you try to stay in the same place until someone comes to rescue you or swim back up to where you fell in? Is that the easiest thing to do? Even swimming against the current so that you don't get swept downstream, swimming against the current, like kind of at a diagonal and trying to make it to the bank, is not the best option, right? That's going to tire you out. The very best thing you can do is swim with the current towards the bank. And then when you reach it, possibly far downstream, walk to where you want to go. That is the least tiring thing. It's the thing that's the safest and most likely to prevent drowning. You have to go with the flow. You have to grow with the flow. You have to go with the flow of your life. It would have been impossible for me at 17 to prevent losing our family home. Just wasn't an option. If I fight against that hard enough, the end game is you're locked in a mental institution because you're completely delusional and crazy and you insist on nothing ever changing around you. You lose your mind. You can lose your mind to grief over loss and trauma. You can lose everything else in your life to loss over grief and trauma, or you can accept that the things that are happening and that they, while they may threaten the things that make you comfort, your perceived source of comfort, they don't have to threaten your identity, your existence. This is not an existential threat. It will change the way things are, and it will change the way you respond to things if you engage with it in a healthy way. But it doesn't have to end you. It doesn't have to end your life. And it doesn't have to end your enjoyment of life or all the good things in your life. It's going to change things. I think dealing with the pain of the right then and there, to answer the environmental service company owner's question, is about getting to a place of accepting that this is happening and choosing to grow with it. You don't have to agree with it, by the way. You don't have to agree with it. You can understand it. You can acknowledge it. You can agree with it. The understanding is vital. This is what's happening right now. You need to understand it, to acknowledge it. It's a form of acceptance. I'm going to take this awareness that this is happening into me as a person. I'm not going to let it be bigger than me. I'm not going to let all my feelings be bigger than me. I'm going to grow enough that they, relative to the size of my identity and my awareness, they are inside me. I'm not inside them. And I'm going to bring them back inside myself so that I'm bigger than that. And I have control. I have free will, not control over the circumstances, not control over the outcome, not control over the environment, control over your response to those things. You're always in control of how you respond if you choose to be, even if you're not in control of the outcome. And being able to control your response, that's the best anybody can do. If you're doing that, you've met your duty to be a good person and to be in control. Just do your best. You always have the resources you need to do your best in any given situation. By definition, that's true. So the best thing that you can do to get past these feelings of pain and anxiety and overwhelm in the event of a disruption, if the whole world's changing around you, the society seems to be sliding towards chaos, and you think California is about to slip into the ocean and it's going to be, Yellowstone's going to erupt and the aliens are going to invade and the robots are going to take over and it's going to be a pandemic and I'm going to have to live the rest of my life in a bunker. Oh my God. Take a deep breath. Realize that many, if not most of those things, if they ever happen, probably won't happen in your lifetime, right? And they're not happening to you right now. If those things are real possibilities, they're possibilities in the future. And right now, today, you're sitting here listening to this. You have everything you need. And if you're listening to this live stream, your life's probably pretty good right now in this moment. You might think, well, it might not always be. I could lose everything. Yeah, you could. But you'll respond to those things in the moment when they happen. And all that fear isn't helping you. It is going to trigger your amygdala and may shut down your brain, right? You need to come at this from a place of calmness, a calm, quiet mind. There you can make good decisions. You can engage your prefrontal cortex. You can, as all your creativity and your higher reasoning and your best virtue, most virtuous self, that's where all of that lives, not in the fear over what's happening. Fear triggers fight or flight. You need to focus on the feeling of security right now and love, because love, the other motivating force in human existence, is going to push you towards making the best choice. I listened to an episode of the Jordan B. Peterson podcast the other day, and he had Sam Harris on as a guest. And Sam Harris is kind of this new school atheist who doesn't believe, he believes in moral absolutes like good and evil, but he doesn't believe that we need God to explain their existence. And I think that's interesting. I disagree with him because I'm a Catholic, a devout Catholic. And so obviously I don't just believe in God, I believe in the Christian God, and specifically the way the Catholic Church describes him, right? So that's my belief. But I still like Sam Harris. I still love Sam Harris. And I still love Jordan Peterson. I love the people that I disagree with or don't entirely agree with, or the people that I agree with. Whether or not you agree with someone doesn't have to change whether or not you like or love them. And it doesn't have to change your receptivity to their ideas. So as I was listening to this podcast with these two guys that I've never met, but still love and still am very receptive to, they were talking about how most of the news, they were talking about Twitter. Most of what they received on social media on Twitter was just really negative. Like 50% of it at least was very negative. So it was to the point where Sam Harris just checked out. He just deleted his Twitter account and just checked out. And he's got his own app, his own platform, his own podcast. He said most of the rest of what's going on in my life is very positive. So I didn't need all that negativity in my life. And so he opted out. He said every once in a while, yeah, I do feel, basically, to paraphrase him, he was saying he felt FOMO, fear of missing out on the conversation. But he and Jordan Peterson were talking about the idea that slowing down, not being able to give that instant response on Twitter, made them more selective about what they talked about in their, with their audience. And I think that's really important. Whenever you're encountering all these disruptions, after you acknowledge, oh, okay, I feel anxious because this is how I feel in my body. I have all this anxiety. This is what's going on. And, it's hard to breathe and whatever. Then you decide, okay, well, I still have control over my response. I don't have control over the situation. That's okay. That's not a threat to me. Right. So this is sort of the checklist. Feel how you feel, get bigger in your awareness than these feelings, and then decide to slow way down. It's like an internal time machine. Like meditation, mindfulness practice can be like a time machine where you slow everything down. What this actually is your consciousness speeding up. It's the psychological equivalent of what Einstein described, right? As you speed up your mind, and the way that you speed up your mind is not the short-term energy of lighting up your amygdala of the fight or flight response, right? But as you really speed up the best and most brilliant parts of your brain, the ones that are fueled by love, not fear, right? If you get away from fear and you embrace love, it's going to really speed up your holistic consciousness. It's going to bring your subconscious mind more into alignment with your conscious mind. It's going to allow you to think with your whole self. And it's going to speed things up. And the natural effect of that is everything else around you slows down relative to what's going on inside you. That's when you start to grow. That's how you grow with the flow. And when you do that, then you get all of these great abilities as a leader. So you're starting to lead yourself in a better direction, but you also have way more energy to lead other people. Great leaders don't just encounter disruption constructively for themselves, which is the process I've been describing, but they also embrace it as a harbinger of opportunity. They understand that disruption is as much a force of creation as it is of destruction. And if you're really positive about things, it's more of a force for creation. That old things pass away, but they're replaced with something better. And with this assurance, great leaders approach disruption with peace of mind. So that's our next step, is to promote peace of mind from that point, from a place of love, from that mindset. Then yes, to answer the question, you develop the action plan. What steps are we going to do? And Sam Harris talked about how we didn't really need to know in the podcast. He talked about we didn't really need to know the penultimate good to know in any given moment what would be the better choice. What would be, we don't have to know. If you think about taking a long trip somewhere, a journey, right? I don't have to know where, if I'm traveling to Wyoming, I don't know, or if you're traveling to Boise, Idaho. I've never been to Boise. I've seen it on a map along, like many times, but I don't have to pull up Google Maps and say, hey, I'm walking to Boise, Idaho. Can you chart me a course there? And I don't have to know by following Google Maps every single step that it would take for me to get to Boise, Idaho. I know I'm in Tennessee and Boise is over there, northwest of here. So all I need is a little compass and I need to go northwest. And if I take one step northwest, I'm one step closer to Boise, Idaho. And that'll get you, as long as you kind of know where you are and where Boise is generally, the general direction, and you have a compass, you can just keep taking one step and one step and one step, closer and closer and closer. Now, of course, throughout that process, especially as you get further along, you have to continue to calibrate and recalibrate. So it's good to be present and generally aware of, well, like, where am I relative to where I'm trying to go? It's good to calibrate. You need good tools for that. And I think that's where Sam Harris's reasoning kind of starts to break down, because as you actually make progress, the task of calibrating gets a little bit harder and more nuanced and more fine-tuned. Like, eventually you're going to find yourself in Boise, like, oh yeah, okay, I got here. Or you're just going to circle around it for a while and you're going to be lost in the wilderness, because you actually do need to know with precision where you're going and how to calibrate yourself perfectly to it. But at the outset of the journey, and perhaps for the first little while, for the first period of time in your journey, you don't really need to know every step. The farther away from your goal you are, with the less precision you need about where you're going. You just need to be able to take a directionally correct step. And the journey is always made of directionally correct steps. As you go, that you're going to need to learn how to calibrate. But the beauty of the process is this: as you get closer and closer to the goal, you're going to develop the tools to better calibrate yourself towards knowing, am I here? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Not in an impatient, childish way, but hey, maybe I'm here. Is this here? And like my son, he's still at the "are we there yet" phase, where he's bored. Are we there yet? And we talk about this a lot, right? What do you do if you just have to wait? If you just have to be patient? Do you get creative? Do you make it a game? Do you sing a song? Do you distract yourself? Or do you engage with the present moment where you actually are while you're waiting? That's the healthiest and most creative thing to do. But at a certain point, you start asking yourself, am I here yet? Not because you're impatient, but because you just might be. You just might be there already. It's a weird thing for people, and you see this especially with really highly successful people, with leaders. You see some people who are still trying to get there, but they've been there for a while. They're still trying to be successful. They're still trying to get financial security, or get peace of mind, or get validation, or get all these things that are going to make them feel like they made it. But they made it a while ago. Like, I thought about the other day, I thought, if Elon Musk wanted to just be like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to take, it's like a casino, right? He's been in the casino for a while and he's doing great. He is the chip leader, right? He's the chip leader in the poker game. What if he just took all his chips and cashed out and just left the casino of human industry? What if he just took all of his money and just checked out and went completely Howard Hughes and nobody ever heard from him again? And he just lived whatever kind of life he wanted to live on a little island somewhere. He could do that. What's to stop him from doing that? It would be kind of terrible for humanity if that happened, I think, because he has a unique genius that has improved and will continue to improve the lives of billions of people in ways that it's going to take a long time for us to fathom. He is a wildly influential person. I'm not saying he's a perfect person or a great, personal life role model or any of that stuff. I'm just saying he's had his life has brought huge benefit to humanity. And it would be a shame for all of us if he checked out or was somehow, he's too big to be canceled. He's like the true too big to fail. Like, because he would be canceled. if he could be canceled, if the cancel culture could cancel him, he would be canceled. But he's too big to be canceled. He's got too much, too many people are too invested in him, whether it's governments or corporations or whatever. There's tons of people who are invested in his success, and he's invested in other people's success. He's too big to be canceled. And it would be a shame if anybody tried, because he's doing great things. But what if he decided, looks like we made it? I won't sing. I'll keep my day job. I have no career in the music industry, right? But what if, looks like we made it? What if he just decided that he was done? What if you just decided you were done? One of the things that I do with my business clients sometimes, not for every single one of them, is, when we're talking about strategy and developing strategy for their business, I'll say, you should just close your business down. You should just close it today, tomorrow, like yesterday, if possible. You should just shut down. And they'll be like, what? Why would you say that? I'd be like, well, you're not really producing anything that's valuable or unique in the world. Look at all your competitors. They're all doing exactly what you're doing. And if you closed up shop tomorrow, all your customers, they would within a month, they would have a replacement. You're easily replaceable. So why are you even here? You should just go get a job. You should just go get a job. You should go work for a competitor, actually. Find your biggest competitor. Just sell out to them if you can. But even if you can't, just close your business down and go work for them. And the client is like horrified, indignant. But what would happen to all our employees? What would happen to all of our customers? How can you say we're not doing good in the world? Look at all these things we're doing. And I go, exactly. You just identified all the most valuable parts of your business. All the good that you're doing in the world, all the employees who depend on you, all of those things that would be lost if you did just close up shop, those are the things you need to focus on. And I'm sorry for messing with you and telling you should close your business down. I obviously didn't mean that because I'm here to support you, right? But you almost have to get like, oh my God, what would I really stand to lose? What's really scary with a client is if you play that game with them and you say, you should just close down your business. They're like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Then it's like, oh, they really have, sometimes that's the right choice strategically. If they're like, you know what? You're right. I wouldn't feel like the world would lose anything. I wouldn't lose anything. I've just been waiting for a long time for someone to tell me I should just quit. I should just phone it in. Like you saying that, what a relief. And I'm like, oh crap. Okay, well, I guess it is time. I guess it is time for you to close up shop if that's how you feel. But good and healthy businesses or people who are like actually committed to building something, they never have that response. Their response is, no, these people depend on me. This is the good that I'm doing in the world. This really does matter. And how dare you tell me I should close down? The more intense and the more fighty they get about it, the more I have hope that we can actually build something useful in their business. And now we've easily isolated and targeted the things that we need to build a strategy around, to build the action plan, because those are the things they love. They love the results they're getting in the world. They love the people that depend on them. So that makes it easier to build that action plan. I got another question about ESG, and I'm not even going to talk about who presented this because I don't, ESG is a controversial thing. Go talk to Microsoft Copilot on Bing about ESG. That'll be the fun way for you to have your argument with the AI. Environmental social governance. I think Ben Shapiro on the Daily Wire has a really good treatment of this. If you want to just Google Ben Shapiro and ESG and then or listen to some episodes of his podcast on the Daily Wire on the Ben Shapiro show. I think, I don't agree with Ben about everything, but I think his read or at least his treatment of the facts around the development of ESG in corporate America in the last 5 years or so is spot on. It's a lot of top down, like uber wealthy people in alliance with people in the government who have an agenda that they want to see pushed. They want to push a certain agenda. The government knows that it can't mandate that because it will cost them political power. But the corporations can, because they're private companies, right? They can do whatever they want as long as they don't violate the 1964 Civil Rights Act or whatever and all this other anti-discriminatory regulation that we have. As long as they don't do that, they can push this agenda, because if you don't like it, just quit and go get another job, right? So they can push the agenda, and then the government can come right in behind and support them with regulatory enforcement or at least, like just playing ball in whatever way on the ESG agenda. So my thoughts on ESG are, if it's being pushed through a capitalist or pseudo-capitalist marketplace, if you don't like it, your option is to not spend money with those people, with those companies, right? If you don't like it, then you need to vote with your dollars. And that kind of goes back to, it's reckless and irresponsible to just tune out of what's going on in the news. You need to stay informed. And the adapting to change and overcoming challenges, part of that in the public arena, and maybe this is appropriate for an election year. I never thought about writing Lead Again in an election year. I didn't think about publishing this in an election year. This is not a political book, and it's not about elections or winning elections or culture wars or any of that, except to the extent that there's overlap between the conversation around culture wars and virtuous leadership. There's a lot of overlap there, but that's not what this is. This is not a book about the election cycle or the political parties in the United States or elsewhere. It's not about that. And I didn't really even think about it being an election year until I just kind of noticed that here in the last couple of weeks. I was like, oh, hey, look what I did. Look what God did through me by accident, right? Not on purpose, just serendipitous. But all of these discussions, this conversation that we're having is absolutely useful in an election year, because you do need to be aware and you need to vote with your dollars, at least. I'm not sure how much voting in the elections, I mean, I guess it makes a difference, but I do think that the people who are on one side of the political spectrum have to turn out to the polls in hugely greater numbers than people on the other side, because one side cheats and the other side doesn't, it seems. So I vote with your dollars. I know some people, it's 11:30 and some people have to start dropping off. I've got some messages about that. I appreciate that. Thank you for joining the group chat. We've still got about 30 minutes to kind of wind up the rest of the coaching session here, but I just want to say, to sort of cap off this conversation about the questions around ESG and everything like that. If you don't like it, then, choose to engage with a different thing. I don't think that you should get out there and oppose ESG. I don't think that anybody should be fighting against it. I don't think, I think what you resist persists. And I think the best thing to do is to promote alternatives, promote what you prefer, promote your preference, go out there and build something different. Get out there and make sure that if there's a lot of fear in your space, that you're replacing it with love. I don't think you should just fight fear, because how do you fight fear? What do you generate a fear of fear? You can't fight fire with fire. You can't fight fear with fear. The only way to fight fear or anything else is with its opposite. The opposite of fear is love. So I think promoting more love in your life, bringing in more light, bringing in more love, I think is the way to get less fear and darkness. I I mentioned Sam Harris, and no one's asked me to be a guest on the Jordan B. Peterson podcast. I certainly would if I were asked, but no one's asked me. Because he's never heard of me and I'm super small time, so that's fine. But if I had an opportunity to guest on the podcast, and if I could speak to what Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris had talked about, I would say I think the fundamental flaw in Sam Harris's analysis of, good and evil seem to exist, but he's trying to find a reason that they exist outside of God. I don't even want to argue the theistic point, right? I'm not even going to make the religious argument. I'm just going to say that evil doesn't really exist. It's not a thing. Good is a thing. And the absence of good is evil. What we call evil is just a void. It's a hole. It's like good is a donut, and absolute good is like a cream-filled donut or something. Fill it with whatever you like, jam-filled donut, right? That's absolute good. It's a whole donut with no hole in the middle. Instead, it's just filled with deliciousness. And that is absolute good. That's good with no evil, except, the space around the donut that's not donut. Like if all of existence was one big jam-filled donut. Maybe I'm hungry. Maybe I should have had more breakfast. But that's metaphorically, figuratively, what good is. It's something. It's the substance of something. Where evil exists is where you have a hole in the middle of your donut. It's the space where there is no good. It's the absence of good. It's not a thing in and of itself. The evil doesn't have any substance of itself. It's just the absence of good. The old saying that all that's necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing, or words to that effect, is absolutely right. That's the essence of all of it. That if there's evil in your life, if there's fear in your life, if there's anxiety over disruption in your life, it's because there's an absence of the positive in your life. Not like smile or die positivity, which is actually super toxic. I think Barbara Ehrenreich, if I'm remembering that right, had this whole talk about smile or die. She may have written a book called Smile or Die. I can't remember. It's been years since I kind of engaged with that thought leadership, but you can go look it up. The RSA, the Royal Society for the Arts in Great Britain, in the UK, did this whole RSA Animates series, and they did a video. You can go look it up on YouTube, called Smile or Die, and they were about that. It was about toxic positivity in corporate culture, especially in corporate culture, but how this approach of you have to always say something, you have to always smile, you have to always be positive. Nothing bad ever happens. Oh no, it's just love and light. Everything is good. And just like I eat sunshine and crap rainbows. It's all good. Everything's perfect. It's not. And that's delusional and kind of scary. Honestly, if I had a manager that was like that in my work, I would try to find another place to work. I at a certain level, the deception, the deceit, the duplicity and dishonesty, all the D words, I I hate all of that. That toxic positivity creeps me out. To me, it's like a clown. right? A clown with a big painted on smile. And that clown can be like dead inside, right? But the smile's painted on. I hate that. It's so creepy. And I'm not talking about bringing in more positivity, like bring in the clowns. I'm not. Um, and likewise, the sort of Pagliacci sad clown thing is uh, is a bit dishonest as well, right? I'm here for authenticity, but I want to, when circumstances and the environment and the results that you're getting are things you don't like, they're negative. There's not a whole lot of good there. There's not a whole lot of love there. There's a lot of darkness in your environment and in your results. What I want you to do is, and what I hope that you will do to encounter this disruption in a positive way, when I say bring positivity to it, is I say bring acceptance into that and bring free will into that and say, I have a choice here. And I am not going to allow this crushing energy from outside myself to destroy me. Instead, I'm going to bring resources from within myself, a greater awareness here, and I'm going to choose to accept that this is happening and find a path through the disruption, in with the flow of the disruption, towards greater positivity. And if ESG is like suffocating you in your corporate life and you feel like it's at conflict with your values, then you might have the opportunity to go and use your experience to build a new business that does what you do and creates a bubble or a little space for like-minded people, where you're doing what you used to do for this other company, but because the corporate culture is not consistent with your values, you go and create a competitor that is consistent with your values, that doesn't shove ESG down people's throats. Maybe that's an opportunity. Or maybe there's already another company out there that you can go and work for. Maybe there's a Hobby Lobby or a Chick-fil-A or something like that that you can go and work for. Maybe there's an opportunity there for you to put your skills to work for a company that shares your values. That's an opportunity. Maybe you'll even be happier there. Maybe the money won't be as good, or maybe it will. I don't know. Or maybe there will be this change. Maybe you'll have to move. You may have to pay a price. You may have to sacrifice. You may have to give up something to get something better. And that will be a disruption, but it could be so creative and positive for you in your life. Having the hope that things can be better despite a change is what I mean by bringing positivity into the situation. Things could be better even though things are changing, and even though things are changing against my will. And the way things get better is it starts with you, which brings me to a quote that I really love. And I want to say that the quote was from, oh gosh, it was a female comedian. Oh, man. She said, I wish I could tell you that it gets better, but it doesn't. I think it's Joan Rivers. She said, I wish I could tell you that it gets better, but it doesn't. You get better. I'm going to look this up really quick right now. I wish I could tell you that it gets better, but it doesn't. Hmm. Here we go. Yeah, I was right. It's Joan Rivers. How about that? Good for me. I wish I could tell you it gets better. It doesn't get better. You get better. And, you know, I don't like everything that's ever come out of Joan Rivers' mouth, but like she's not one of my absolute like idols or anything like that. Like if I met her, I'd be like, "Oh, hey, it's Joan Rivers. How are you?" You know, shake her hand. Like, "Thank you for your contributions to the cultural conversation, etc." Like, thanks. But thank you especially for this quote. Like that to me is the most valuable thing I ever got from Joan Rivers, because she's absolutely right. Your circumstances, your situation, the disruption you're going through, it may not get better, but you will get better. And when you get better, you make everything else better in your response to the situation. You may not be able to see the penultimate good that will come out of the disruption. You may not know exactly relative to where you are right now in this moment. You might not know where Boise, Idaho is. But if you have a decent compass, you know it's generally northwest of where you are, and you can take a step northwest or 10, right? And you'll be closer to your goal. Things will get better. And you don't have to know what is best. You don't have to know what is best. You just have to have a good feel for what's going to be a little better. And you have to be able to trust that feeling, not because you are the penultimate like arbiter of all good and evil and everything, but because you have a conscience and because you know yourself and because you know that you are fueled by love, not fear. Like you deeply understand that you are filled with love. When you seek out honesty, like self honesty, radical self honesty to the point that it hurts. Like if there's any kind of delusion or any kind of self deception or any kind of dishonesty within yourself, any conflict, right? You've got to root that out and embrace radical responsibility for the truth in your own life. That nothing that is untrue can be loving. It's never like there is never a little white lie. They're all black. They're all dark. They're all tar. They're all sticky. They're all dirty. Every single lie. There's no such thing as a little white lie. There's no such thing as a little harmless self-deception. I know this isn't really true, but it makes me feel good. It's a slippery slope from there to like believing things about yourself that are just horrible. A friend of mine shared with me a story about a person, and I don't even want to be more specific than that, but they started believing about themselves that they were something that they weren't, not that they weren't. And it was obvious just by looking at them, you are not this, but they believed I am this. And it led them to self-mutilation, to a radical shift in who they are, like how they even call themselves, how they refer to themselves. But they like went through dramatic surgery. They got a psychiatrist or psychologist to sign off on everything, but they lopped off body parts and changed their name, and it was horrific and tragic and sad, and did not make them any happier. They're not happier in their life. They're struggling worse than before with their whole identity and who they are and all of these things. And it started with this lie that they told themselves that, well, I'm this because I have this predilection or predisposition, or I'm inclined in this way, or I think this way, or I feel this way. So I must be this. There is no room for both love and dishonesty. Only the truth can ever be loving. So embrace that self honesty first, and then fill your heart with love. If you're full of truth and you're full of love, there won't be any room for self deception or fear or any of the things that will pull your compass in your life off track. Your compass can be well calibrated when you are full of truth and full of love. And then you will take those directionally correct steps to get where you want to go in your life. And when I say love, I really mean like love is wanting what is best for you, like wanting and not being attached to any particular thing, but just saying, I just want what's best. I don't know what best is, but I really want that. And that can be enough. And I believe I'm kind of tackling this from a very secular standpoint for the purposes of this group coaching, but my own personal belief is loving yourself the way that God loves you, loving yourself the way your creator loves you. That's my personal belief. You don't have to share that belief, but I do believe that if you really love yourself the way God loves you, that's what that's what we're after. And then also loving other people the way that God loves them, with absolute mercy, grace, compassion, acceptance for who they are, regardless of what they believe or what they think or how they've hurt you or how they've hurt themselves or anything like that. And speaking the truth to others in love, speaking the truth to yourself in love is, I think that's our calling generally. I think that's what we're here for. Not just the speaking, but also the listening and the responding, the interacting, right? The connecting with other people with absolute honesty, but also absolute love. For a large part of my life, I had what I believed was honesty. It was just blunt analysis. Let me tell you how I see it. This is how I see it, for better for worse. Let the chips fall where they may. At least I'm honest, and just be blunt. You're like, you don't have to like me, but you can't ignore what I'm saying because I'm right. And I focused on being right, on having the right analysis, the right opinion, the right everything. What I was missing was the right attitude. I didn't have the right attitude because I didn't have enough love in my life. I, for a lot of reasons, just didn't have that. So I was speaking what I believed was the truth, but I wasn't doing it in a loving way. You need that if you're going to have good relationships with other people, if you're going to lead other people, if you're going to be a virtuous leader, a good leader, you have to have a lot of love in your life, because there's only so much leadership you can get done, if you even want to call it that, from a place of fear. You can push people with fear, but it's hard to get them to follow you of their own volition, just voluntarily, with a lot of fear. So I want to say thanks to the people who have joined. We're almost out of time. We have about 13 minutes left. As we end, I want to put some resources in your hands. I've talked a lot about, adapting to change and overcoming challenges, mindset, attitude, values, and beliefs. Lots of stuff. We've covered a lot of ground, actually, and was able to answer a couple of questions. I wish that there had been more questions. Let me check in on the feed here. Check in on the LinkedIn event. So again, if you want to join these group coaching sessions in the future, and you want your questions answered the way I answered the questions from the environmental services company, the thing to do is to follow me on LinkedIn and register for the event. We've got like 19 attendees. I think one of those is including me. So 18 other people. And you just join the event by saying you want to attend, right? Just clicking attend event when you go to the event page on LinkedIn. And then you can drop a question in the chat. Christopher Singleton, senior investor says, good morning, Noel. Looks like he joined. That's good to have you on board, Chris. I'm glad you were able to attend live. So it seems like he was here live. And then I had at least one person on the Zoom from the environmental services company asking questions and stuff. I've got to get the Zoom connected to this live stream. But we'll try that for next week. I'll test it out and see how I can. I did test it out earlier this week and it seemed to be working. But when I actually was able to live stream, I did it with the studio. So maybe I need to just make the studio link, not the Zoom link, available to people to join in. If I do that, I think I'm going to have less capacity for the one-on-one dynamic interactions, because I think I can get like 50 people in the Zoom. I think I can only get like 10 people on the stream. So I'll have to kind of look into the tech end of that a little more. But I do want to put some resources in everybody's hands. I don't see any more questions. I was kind of checking in on that. You can just go and leave a comment on the LinkedIn event. You can just go down after you've clicked attend event, then you can just go to the comments section and leave your comment and put your question there. Or you can send me a direct message through LinkedIn with your question, and I will make sure that it's addressed. Disruption is so I've got like five little key takeaways about disruption here, about encountering disruption. There's actually a chapter on encountering disruption in Lead Again in my book. This is my new book. It's the publication date is February 29th. It's a leap year. So it's a leap year. It's an election year. I did notice that it was a leap year when I was publishing this, because when I set the publication date, I was like, I want to do it at the end of February. And then the little scheduler, has a little calendar in there and it said 29. And I was like, oh, that's right. It's a leap year. So that's kind of cool. So the publication date is February 29th. Kind of a special date. I think this is a special book. So you can dive in, and there is a chapter on encountering disruption. It's chapter 14. And the book that you get may not be titled, Encountering Disruption, because I've gone in and done some sort of last minute revisions. I did order a case of these books, a case of copies of Lead Again. But after I did that, those were kind of like proof copies. And after I did that, I went in and made some revisions. There was an issue with citations in one of the chapters where the superscript numbers weren't showing up in C2 in the chapter where I wanted them. All the citations are there in the back of the book in the list of references, but their corresponding numbers weren't in the chapter text. I don't know how that happened, but I went in there and I've kind of fixed that. I updated chapter titles to kind of make the readers focus on how the issues tie into leadership a little more apparent, things like that. So if you are lucky enough to get one of the first print run copies of Lead Again, the first print run of the first edition of Lead Again, you probably have a signed copy, because I think all of them have been signed as they've gone out to people. Then you have kind of a little special collector's edition of the book, because I will change I have changed the chapter titles, and there have been some other revisions. So the actual text of the book it's the same. It'll read the same. But there have been a few tweaks and adjustments, and also a fix to the spine. On the spine, the text was a little too close to the back cover. I tried to fix that in the revisions, in the new revised version of Lead Again. Try to get it centered a little better, but that's sort of out of my hands. That's up to the printer. But Lead Again is now available. It's on sale, and there's been a buy Lead Again like QR code on the screen the whole time, so you can just use your phone to scan that and go get a copy of Lead Again. It's available on Amazon. I saw that it's available on Barnes and Noble. It's available through bookshop.org, and if you buy the book through bookshop.org, every purchase supports independent booksellers, which matters to me. My whole life, I've loved going to little indie bookshops and shopping for books and stuff in a little independent bookstore. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Amazon. I love the service that they provide. I have Prime myself, so I love it. I use it. It's great. Same thing. I used to work for Barnes and Noble. I worked for Barnes and Noble at Triangle Town Center when I was in seminary in North Carolina, and loved working there. Loved the employee discount when I worked there. It was great. So I haven't got nothing against the big box stores and the online retailers and that. And I thank them for carrying my book, but there's just something special about the independent booksellers. So if you go to bookshop.org and you find my book, if you go to the LinkedIn page, the Facebook page for Counsel and Clarity, pinned to the top, there's a little post about all the places you can go and buy you can buy Lead Again. And so if you go and find that, you can find a link right to the Counsel and Clarity shop on bookshop.org. And if you buy it there, then it supports independent booksellers. So if you're really into buying local, shopping local, or at least shopping small, that's a good option for you. So Lead Again is a brand new book. It's all about, it says Modern Guide to Resilience. And basically what this book is it's an in case of emergency break glass guide to recovering from a setback, whether personal or professional. Maybe there's been a recent death in your family or a death of a friend. Maybe you never quite bounced back after COVID, and it seems like everybody else in your life did, and you've just been stuck and you've been left behind. And your business was disrupted. You had to close down because of the shutdowns, and you just never quite got back on your feet. In our community here in Clarksville, Tennessee, my hometown, there was a big tornado. A few people died. Lots of people lost their homes and businesses were damaged, and there's been a lot of disruption from the tornado. And people here in the community are very sensitive to that. They've been very generous. There's been a big outpouring of support to try to help those people to recover. Of course, the various disaster relief services and FEMA has all been in here as well. And so but it's devastating, right? Like even when the physical support, the material support is there, it can be psychologically devastating. Part of the reason I mentioned my family lost our home. Part of the reason was that my family's business was disrupted by a tornado that happened in 1999. We lost the major asset for the business in the 99 tornado, and it just wiped out our last income stream. And so therefore we'd lost our home. It didn't all happen concurrently. We didn't lose the house until 2000, but it was the 99 tornado that ultimately, kind of did us in financially. And that was difficult. I know what it's like to be affected by a tornado. It feels really unfair, but you have to roll with those punches, and that's hard, and you need support and you need help. Lead Again can help. The book can really help. There's lots of lessons very similar to what I've presented in this group coaching session in the book, and it's designed to help you go from setback to come back, to give you the tools that you need to lead yourself. Like all leadership starts with self-leadership, to lead yourself first, and then to have the resourcefulness, the competence, the confidence, the trust to lead other people as well in your life, to fill your life with truth, to get rid of self-deception, self-delusion, to fill yourself with love and open yourself up to the love of God. I believe there is a lot of that. It's not super preachy. I do write from my perspective, which is an eminently Catholic perspective. But I have a degree in philosophy. I try to be intellectually honest. I try to avoid taking a lot of theological shortcuts. I do present some resources there, spiritual resources there, but I try not to do that to such a degree in the book that it would alienate anybody who doesn't share my views. So it's not a super preachy book, but it is full of resources that will help you. And we have some other resources also that will help you. The Clarity Guild is an online community that's absolutely free. It'll never cost you anything to join the Clarity Guild. And I don't have a QR code for that. I should have put one up there. But you can go to counselandclarity.com. And if you click on either the Profit from Legal page or the Rise Above coaching page at counselandclarity.com, you can get there from the Contact Me QR code in the upper corner here of the stream. If you go there and you visit our website and you look at the page for Rise Above or Profit from Legal, if you scroll down the page, there will be a link to the Clarity Guild where you can join the Clarity Guild. It won't cost you anything at all. There are free online classes. There are discussion forums, discussion posts, access to support. And then, of course, there's the group coaching session every week. So follow me on LinkedIn, kind of tune in to what I'm doing, the community that I'm building through Counsel and Clarity, the book that I've written. I want to put free resources in your hands. The book, the community, the coaching, it's not going to cost you anything. If you or your leadership team needs more support, I've been supporting as a chief legal officer or outside general counsel for a dozen years. I've been supporting growth stage businesses and small businesses. I'm here for that. I can provide, a fractional chief legal officer legal support to your business, or I can come in and coach your team on resilient leadership. I can coach you individually or your team and really help you get results that will push you towards greater resilience and help you navigate potential disruptions, both those that have already happened and the ones that are on the horizon that are foreseeable. So I hope you'll reach out, get the support that you need. It is 12 o'clock, so I am out of time, and I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll tune in next week. I hope you've gotten a lot out of this. God bless you, and we will see you next week, hopefully.